What's happening, good people? We are live and direct. This is Black Power Media, where we bring you that critical political action because every day is a great day for revolution. Today, um, we want to talk about one of our main guys, one of our favorite freedom fighters, who is a political prisoner who has been held captive for close to 50 years, 47 years. Leonard Peltier, a cultural icon, not only in the Native community, but in movement circles. We wanted to come today. A lot of folks have been asking, what's going on. We know that there's been a parole hearing, and we know about the parole denials and all that good stuff. We know that there's medical situations going on. So we wanted to set the record straight, but we also want to raise some resources because it's very important for us to have commitment to our PPs, especially when it comes to this fight against the state, because the state has all the capital in the world, and unfortunately, living in a capitalist society, you need a little bit of capital to make noise. So we're hoping that you all take a look at the ticker at the bottom of the screen, Free Leonard Peltier now.org/act-now. You can make donations of all sorts, contributions, and make sure that we're all on the right side of the barricades. I'm going to bring some good friends to the table to talk about our brother Leonard Peltier. So I'm going to ask you all to stand by. Make sure that you like, subscribe, share, and also let your network know that this is going on right about now. Be right back at you. Free Leonard Peltier. Welcome back. Greetings, good people. We have a few wonderful folks joining us here tonight to talk about everything that's going on with Leonard's case, Leonard's campaign. The first person we want to bring to the stage tonight is a longtime spiritual advisor and elder in the community, a brother who is no stranger to Leonard, who will open up with a prayer, but not only a prayer, he would give some reflections on who Leonard Peltier was, and how he knows him as a person. Welcome to the stage, brother Lenny Foster. How are you today?
Thank you. Good morning. Yate, I've been honest. I've been asked to say opening prayer. I'm honored to do that as we remember our relative, our brother, Leonard Peltier, and all others that are in attendance today. Appreciate it. The hard work that's been going on. We acknowledge that. It's been a long, hard struggle. I've known Leonard Peltier, met him in Denver, Colorado in 1970, November. That's over 54 years. And I've been his spiritual leader since he was first incarcerated at USP Leavenworth, Kansas in 1985. March of 1985, I went in and conducted a sweat lodge ceremony with him and the other Native Americans. And we prayed and smoked his pipe. And I've been visiting him ever since. I sundanced with him in Crow Dog's Paradise, 1975, August. And so I know him as a sundancer also. He's a reverent, very reverent person, believes in those ways, traditional beliefs, a pipe carrier, sundancer, and for the past 34 years, I've been visiting him at various facilities such as Leavenworth, Lewisburg, Coleman. Those are all Supermax facilities, and he's treated very harshly, psychological warfare, the different methods, concepts, ways that the United States prison system practices its incarceration of the human being. And Leonard is one of the people that's experiencing that. He's experiencing some bad health, and they refuse to provide him with adequate medical attention. He qualifies for a release to have his sentence commuted, executive clemency. So these are some of the issues that the ad hoc committee, these supporters, are working on very hard. And I'm joined by some very distinguished people today. Don Lawson, Ward Churchill, Suzie Baer, and myself. I'm a Kia'ani, born for Sethani and Tupahe Dashache, and Nagani Dashanala. That's my introduction of myself as to who I am by my clan, Townhouse clan, born for Mountain Cove. My maternal grandparents are River Edge, and my paternal grandparents are Enavane, one who walks around. We identify ourselves as B'nai people by 4 clans. And mine, as I said, is Kia'ani, Tsetlani, Tupahe, and Navane. So I'd like to open up with a prayer as we remember our brother, Leonard Peltier. Krobe John, les Hashon, the Shitha, the Inlon, the Inyot, the Injopai, the Inhajoni, Shada Ana, Hokos. Sis not Jenny Tot Sitlo Cosly, the Bensa, Jeffy and on Fini, the Cado Tordas, Lonchol, no. Ben hit zeal, Ben hit scare. Ben Janon cheek case again hat beat Nabiat Tahat and Biat Yataskip, Johana, and Tartine, Ben Jonan Kanat Fido, they come Shinain Long, Leonard Peltier, Ben Ashne, Turtle Mountain Band of Chippewas and Long, they out of Ikea, they could up in loud. They would out at Edson, they would out on cheek case, they would out. Banat Aid Naho Edicon, Eindla, Bindi Hawan, not that, the Kayan, or that, a good out, Ashon, the Shikati and Long. A good out, what's at Edson, Shed now, Consado de Con also. Should the never last slept and Lenny to get out. A heat couple, a de could out, Ben Ashni, though, the Contan, though, Ward, though, Suzie, also. Collager, Florida, Ado Shidosta, Ado Hikaden, Long, Vened me, they come what's at Edison. 8 citizen, Yat Air, they come, Chod, they come, they have still they citizen, they Leonard Peltier, Obi Caden, Long, I don't think Caden, Long, they come. If it's Isbiat, Ben John and C case, you can have the Yat Air. If he not yet gets out and yet a kitchona each in Tradina Benzona Fanati. Got out, it corner, so but they got out. And said this since it hot in long, it corner without the his on the heads on the slave, the heads on the slave, the heads on the slave, the heads on the slave. They got out, the heads on the slave. Ho, Mataki, all my relations. Oh.
We definitely appreciate these reflections, Brother Lenny, and we appreciate your service to Leonard Peltier and the work that you and your family and movement has continued to put in. So definitely, we thank you for joining us here today.
Oh.
So we have a number of speakers here today. And again, we thank Elder Lenny Foster. But getting started, we have a brother who is no stranger to movement work, who has been laying out information, making it public in regards to counterinsurgency. COINTELPRO. This brother is an author uh, of several different books. He's a professor, and he's one of our favorite people when it comes to dropping this information. Brother Ward Churchill will talk to us on the development of COINTELPRO and its usage by the feds and the goons, which led to the June 26th situation. Welcome, Ward.
Theo, thank you. Pleasure. Well, I don't know if you really call it a pleasure, but honored to be here. Leonard Peltier, the target of COINTELPRO. It of late has become common, even fashionable in a way, to talk in terms of what they call death by incarceration. And that was underplayed in terms of the period when Leonard Peltier went to prison. The COINTELPRO, the summit, the culmination in a way of COINTELPRO era proper. COINTELPRO, I need to really partially lay out in order for this to make sense. And it is an acronym, it would normally be called, actually a cryptonym, because the program was secret during the period of its formal existence. But it both has antecedents that stretch back even before the inception of the Bureau of Investigation, which is the federal predecessor to the FBI, same entity, simply renamed. Goes before that, clear back to the war between the states, the War of Succession, whatever, in the 1860s, with the Pinkerton Detective Agency, which was the private sector entity retained by the newly formed Justice Department at the end of the war in the 1860s, right up until the beginning of the 20th century, shortly before the formation of the Bureau of Investigation. The things that it was doing they constitute prototypes of what the FBI has continued to do through the COINTELPRO era, which ended with a citizen's disclosure, a burglary, a black bag job, as the FBI calls them, of FBI office in Media, Pennsylvania in 1971, and continues in other nomenclature, other terms applied to it right into present time. COINTELPRO, the cryptonym, stands for Counterintelligence Program. Counter gives you the CO, intelligence gives you the intel, and program gives you the pro, COINTELPRO. COINTELPRO wasn't really a counterintelligence program. Methods that were used were utilized in counterintelligence operations by the Bureau, but counterintelligence was directed at the agents of foreign powers, hostile foreign powers usually, but foreign powers in any case, espionage, sabotage, and so forth. It began in 1956, so they said. That's when they adopted the cryptonym and created very tightly controlled targeting of the already moribund, it would have been destroyed, Communist Party USA. Basically, you had the FBI infiltrating the Communist Party to such an extent that they maintained its existence. And there was a joke that went during this period, the late 50s, early 60s, that you could tell who the FBI infiltrators were because they were the ones paying the dues. So the FBI was rostering and financing the target which was a practice operation in a way, in which they worked out techniques and coordination, organization, and all of that sort of stuff. And then in the 1960s, branched out. Now, you can make the argument, and it has been made, that the FBI actually considered the Communist Party to be a potential or proven espionage operation, and there was KGB and Soviet military intelligence penetration there. But that could not be the case with the Socialist Workers' Party, which was immediately targeted. It could not be the case, although the caption, unlike the SWP, which actually carried the COINTELPRO caption, the Puerto Rican independence movement, both on the island and in the continental United States. This was not, nothing about a foreign power. The United States is claiming colonial prerogatives over the island, and inside the U.S. is the U.S., and Puerto Ricans are considered U.S. citizens. So, you can carry it on from there. COINTELPRO was the utilization of those methods that were designed to neutralize, and that's the FBI's own term, for the targets of the operation. They would not be protected by the Constitution because they were not, generally speaking, to citizens of the United States. They were operatives of these foreign powers. Okay. Other targets that were taken during the early period that we're talking about, into the early 1960s, not only Socialist Workers' Party and the Puerto Rican independence movement, but the Civil Rights Movement, notably the Southern Christian Leadership Council, because an individual who was an advisor to the Reverend Martin Luther King had been, more than a decade before, a member of the Communist Party. Okay. The Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, a student organization, and this evolves over a period of time into a COINTELPRO targeting the Black liberation movement in the United States as a whole, with particular emphasis on the Black Panther Party, the one that was established by Bobby Seale and Huey Newton in Oakland, California in 1966. They took the name from Lowndes County, Alabama Freedom Organization. He used the logo of a Black Panther and, basically told the Klan that was terrorizing them in that area, preventing voter registration and such by armed force and intimidation, that if you bring weapons and point them, we will shoot back. That caught attention, and it worked. You had another example of that in North Carolina, Monroe, North Carolina, with an NAACP dissident chapter who met Klan violence with armed resistance, and the Klan went scurrying away. I could run through this some more, but once you get to the Black Panther Party emphasis in the late 1960s into the early 1970s, total destruction of the party had assumed another form. This was never really a counterintelligence operation. It was a counter-subversion operation in a way. And the anti-war movement and the New Left were also targeted. Ultimately, the women's liberation movement in its early phases was targeted, and so on and so on. Okay, it was anything that was deviating from the Bureau's version of business as usual, maintaining order, and the order was a white supremacist order, a capitalist order, a colonial order, an imperial order. It was a very reactionary entity, and the Bureau was quite concerned with inculcating the proper ideology among its agents. By the time we get to the late COINTELPRO period, you have ideological conformity and reactionary sentiments and so forth, part bureau that's quite uniform. Exceptions are essentially dismissed from service. Okay, with COINTELPRO, you have what's called Section 5. You have the domestic intelligence, domestic security end of things. The head of that is Bill Sullivan. And they do things like targeting King. Well, you see what happened with King. They had earlier targeted Malcolm X. You can see what happened with Malcolm X. You get to the Panthers, you get Fred Hampton and Mark Clark, you get Bunchy Carter and John Huggins, you get about 30 people who are literally killed off. You got a bunch of civil rights workers during Freedom Summer and so forth that have been killed off. What we discover was already become apparent in those times is that the FBI was using surrogates to carry these things out. They supposedly had a COINTELPRO going against white racist organizations, notably the Klan, but the purpose becomes clear, even in the memoirs of the FBI personnel who were running it and serving as operatives, was to assert control over the clans and use them as counters in the broader effort to roll back the, well, for lack of a better term, we'll just describe it as left opposition, the liberation movements, particularly national liberation movements. Excuse me. What happens is an interlock that is developed between the FBI and what it considers civic organizations. Often it has to create those, organize them, equip them, provide them with intelligence and so forth, the Klan being a notable example. But you've got a broader interlock than that. The FBI has been offloading its personnel into local police forces, providing personnel the expertise and so forth for the existence and functioning of red squads in virtually every major police department, and also providing training, ideological instruction, and so forth, National Association of Police Chiefs and all of that. You've got a coordination with every police department worthy of the name through the country, often key personnel in the police departments, whether you're talking Los Angeles or the Bay Area or Baltimore or New York or whatever, or FBI trained personnel. They're trained in the FBI, then they're offloaded to the police departments and major corporations for corporate security. And you've got this little thing with military intelligence. J. Edgar Hoover, the lifetime director of the FBI from really the First World War until his death in 1972, he was in charge of things the entire period and had shaped it into something conforming with his own sensibilities, moral structure, and such. He had never served in the military, but took a reserve colonel's commission in Army intelligence. And his number two guy, and possible lover, Clyde Tolson, took a commission in naval intelligence, or the Navy, and worked in naval intelligence, which gave them access to the military political files and such throughout the period of Bureau. You talked about, or it's, part of the standard narrative that the FBI stood down from political operations after 1920, when Hoover became the ascendant figure in the Bureau, until the Rose Garden meeting with Franklin Roosevelt, which unleashed the political surveillance and repressive activities. Primarily, it was supposed to be targeting Nazi sympathizers and Italian fascist sympathizers and such, but primarily was directed against the Communist Party and the Trotskyites and so forth. Okay, you have this interlock with military intelligence. Military have what they call Plan White, and it goes through several iterations, but basically it's an overview of how you implement a program of repression in times of disturbance, civil disturbance primarily. Okay, that will include military, the federal repressive components like the FBI, the local and state and local police entities and private service organizations, as well as corporate entities, to maintain the status quo. You got a guy named Louis Giuffrida who, in about 1960, goes to the War College and does what amounts to a master's thesis on Plan White, and comes up with various scenarios. And he's hired by Ronald Reagan as governor in California to put these together, these scenarios. He's got a couple of them of particular interest in this case, one of which is codenamed Cable Splasher, the other is Garden Plot. Cable Splasher, you could say, to simplify things, was for urban scenarios, and it's used against the Black Panther Party, which results in about 30 Panther fatalities and a whole raft of people who were falsely prosecuted, trumped up charges, withholding of exculpatory evidence, and the whole bit, and sentenced into extraordinarily long prison terms. And we've still got people who are dying in prison from that period. You know, you're talking the late 60s, early 70s, and they're just now getting let out because they're assured that they're within 3 months of dying. Okay, that's their medical condition. Or they die in prison, as Chip Fitzgerald did recently, as both David Rice, or Mondo Wilonga is the name that he took, and Michael Poindexter in the Omaha 2 case from the early 1970s. Poindexter recently died. Rice died, or Mondo died several years ago, and so on. And Mutulu Shakur, who they recent release, died shortly thereafter. Okay, after 40 odd years in prison. Maroon Schultz, who went to prison in the early 70s, they let him out. He lived less than 3 months after he was released, and so on and so on. Basically, people talking about the assassination of Hampton and Clark and so on, as they should, from the late 1960s, are neglecting to mention that you had just as effective, in a way, neutralization through extra-legal utilization of the judicial system against the Black Panthers in the case of AIM, which is one of several programs that seem to continue COINTELPRO without the caption after it was discontinued in 1971. And this is according to the Church Committee in 1975-76. In their report, there were several programs that appeared to be continuing these same kinds of operations, but were no longer using the cryptonym. Okay, one of those would have been the American Indian Movement. The American Indian Movement would be Garden Plot, and that's the rural application of Giuffrida's plans. Okay, you got basically a counterinsurgency. This is no longer, in the case of Panthers or in the case of the American Indian Movement, this is no longer counter-subversion. You got literal counterinsurgency warfare being waged in the structure of Pine Ridge, which was ground zero for the FBI's repression of AIM and the mounting of the counterinsurgency campaign. You had this heavily overlapped with the Bureau of Indian Affairs Police on the reservation entity called the Goons, Guardians of the Oglala Nation, which functioned essentially as a death squad, although they, broader repression and that, beatings and so forth. It was just endemic. And that leads to the situation, the armed self-defense of the American Indian movement during the period 1973-76, after the Wounded Knee siege. You got this heavy repression that's being visited under a garden plot scenario coordinated by the FBI, which has the heaviest concentration of agents to citizens in the history of the Bureau up to that point. And they're just basically physically intimidating, trying to repress, destroy the movement, because Indians were, American Indian movement in particular, but not only the American Indian movement, were pushing treaty rights, land rights, and so forth, that the other liberation movements lacked that grounding in U.S. law. And so it was a very heavy emphasis placed on this. And you have the firefight at Ogallala aim a security component from the northwest aim, with several people who were later prosecuted for the exchange of gunfire when two FBI agents tried to provoke it. They got it on that day. And two agents were killed, along with an AIM member, Joe Stuntz, Killsright, and so on. Peltier alone, among those who was targeted for prosecution, was convicted on the basis of entirely fabricated case. His two co-defendants that went to trial, Bob Robidoux and Dino Butler, were acquitted by an all-white jury in Cedar Rapids, Iowa. Not exactly a hotbed of radicalism, you might say, but this all-white jury acquitted on the basis of self-defense, based on hearing from the FBI director himself, in part, for the U.S. Civil Rights Commission and so forth. The FBI had essentially implemented a, quote, reign of terror, end quote, on Pine Ridge, which had to do with land rights, had to do with minerals, so forth, in the so-called Sheep Mountain Gunnery Range, which, as it turns out, had been transferred to federal control by the puppet who had been installed there, Dick Wilson, head of the goon squads. I mean, they all reported to him. Okay, he signed that land away quietly, with nobody knowing about it at the time, in conjunction with the firefight that occurred in Ogallala. So one was to divert attention from the other, and it didn't work out quite as they planned. But, you know, after Butler and Robidoux were acquitted, then they had only Leonard Peltier, the scapegoat for the deaths of two agents, which is virtually unprecedented. Quarterback babyface Nelson had killed two agents. I think that was the only precedent for that. They had to convict him. So the entire trial record from they went judge shopping, took the prosecution of Peltier away from the assigned judge. He never was even informed as to why the case had been moved up to jurisdiction in North Dakota, where they had a sympathetic judge. The sympathetic judge ruled that the entire trial record from Cedar Rapids was inadmissible. You end up with agents who had testified to one theory of a group ambush and so forth against Butler and Robidoux, testified to the exact opposite of what they had witnessed and so forth, changed their testimony entirely when they went against Peltier. You had all manner of misbehavior. This case was a travesty from start to finish. That's been shown. Courts have admitted it. Prosecutors have admitted it. But the FBI will not. And Leonard Peltier continues to sit in prison as an example of the arbitrary ability of the federal government, in the form of the FBI and collaborating entities, judicial and otherwise, to make the costs of resistance, insistence upon rights, prohibitive for the individuals that are involved. It has not been entirely successful, but Leonard continues to pay the price. He must be freed. He must be freed. He must be freed now. His medical condition and the whole nature of the case demands it. Demands it. If they can do this to him, ultimately they can do it to anyone when they need a symbol in order to scare people out of insisting upon the rule of law and their rights. There's more that I could say on that, but I think I've already talked too long. I will now shut up and turn it over to my colleagues on the panel. Paul Matakis.
Cool.
Right on. Ward, you never talk enough. You know what I mean? It may sound long, but the thing is, we have a history of repression. There's a history of war against our people, and for some, this is their first time even hearing about Leonard Peltier at all. I know many people haven't heard of AIM, the American Indian Movement, and it's unfortunate. But, especially right now in these times when you have this uh, criminal election, you know what I mean? When you have this, uh, the criminal settler state of Israel committing genocide in real time. You have so many different situations going on. You have folks confused as to who should be the next ruler of the empire, and at the same time, we have political prisoners like Leonard Peltier, like Mumia Abu Jamal, like Imam Jamil Alameen, formerly H. Rap Brown, uh, like Dr. Joy Powell, and so many other people who are suffering right now. So it is an honor for me to have the opportunity to be in community with you all, because I know that this is truly about work and it's not about fame or some feel good speeches to make folks comfortable about this level of oppression. One of the things I'd like to do at this moment, first of all, remind folks that we are raising funds for Leonard Peltier's fight. They say freedom ain't free. You're getting to watch this program. In many places, in many cases, we'll pay hundreds of dollars to go to a concert. We'll pay all types of money to to find the best weed to smoke. You know what I mean? To do whatever it is we need to do. But when it comes to our liberation, like Malcolm said, we bleed when white folks say bleed, but when it comes to bleeding for our liberation, we ain't got no blood. You know what I mean? Don't blame me. That's Malcolm, and I support what Malcolm has to say. Uh, so make sure you check out. There's a ticker at the bottom. I'm going to add his Cash App right here. This is a Cash App to support what's going on for Leonard Peltier. Cash App is right here. Forgive me, it looks like I need to do some work on that, but you get the message. Also, you can go to the website, freeleonardpeltiernow.org/act-now, and put something in the bucket. Let's just say that the virtual bucket we have. We take for granted that folks know who Leonard Peltier is. So I want to be self-critical, and I want to backtrack. And for our next guest, amongst other things that they'll be talking about, we want to make sure that we get an idea of who Leonard Peltier is. Our guest that's coming up next, Suzie Baer, is a filmmaker, an award-winning filmmaker, a filmmaker who's put in some serious work and who has dedicated her life uh, to our liberation struggle. As a dynamite film that honestly I just recently caught. I guess I don't know. Maybe I was under a rock. I missed it, missed the boat. But I suggest that you not be under a rock and join the ranks and check out her film Warrior: The Life of Leonard Peltier. Suzie Baer, welcome to the platform.
Thanks so much, Kalanchi. It's an honor to be here. Ward, that was just a master class on the FBI and the federal government. That was brilliant. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. So as Kalanji said, my film is called Warrior: The Life of Leonard Peltier. I finished in 1992, and it is available free on YouTube. It is a comprehensive story of Leonard, who Leonard is, and his trial, and what happened to end his trial. It's some people say it's a little dense. It has all the information. Sometimes it's worth watching a couple times. So I've known. I started making my film in 1988. I read Peter Matheson's book, In the Spirit of Crazy Horse. Honestly, read In the Spirit of Crazy Horse and watch my film, and you got it. That's all. That's the stuff. Anyway, I read Peter Matheson's book and was surprised that I had never heard of Leonard Peltier in 1988, and was shocked that no one had made a film about him. So I decided, okay, I'll give it my best shot. I think it was a youthful, I can do anything. And I made it. It tells the story. My goal was, not long before I started working on Warrior, I had seen the film The Thin Blue Line by Errol Morris. It was in the 80s. It was a documentary film that got a man out of prison because it showed the facts. He couldn't have done it. They had a retrial and the man got out of prison. I was like, oh, that's all you have to do. Just show the facts, and then people will see it and they will understand that the incarceration is incorrect. Youth. And so I made the film. There are a couple other films out there. I want to go back to Ward for just a second. The COINTELPRO's infiltrators into the Black Panther Party and the American Indian movement, their effectiveness can't be understated. It's brilliant and evil, and so effective. As Ward said, many Panthers died, not the least Fred Hampton and Mark Clark. And it also, affected the American Indian movement. Sorry. Okay. I'm not sure what else to say. I come watch my film, watch it on YouTube. Leonard's parents are in it, Alvina Peltier and Leo Peltier. His uncle, Bob Robidoux' father, is in it. A lot of elders. And it really tells his story, start to finish. Yeah, I'm just going to jump around. And I would just like to say, Leonard is kind of an icon. He's, in my mind, he is Nelson Mandela. Like that's where I see the comparison. Wrongly convicted and needs to be out of prison. That he's not. He was a victim of Hoover's FBI. Ward laid out all the reasons why, right? It's not, there are no facts that are keeping him in prison. It's the evilness of the FBI and an unjust government and an unjust judicial system. And he needs to be freed. He just needs to be freed. That's all I have to say. If I'll take questions, or but thank you very much for having me here. I hope everyone goes to YouTube and checks out the film, Warrior, The Life of Leonard Peltier. And also show your support and donate some money. Honestly, it's the best money you'll spend. It is used very effectively, and he deserves it. So thank you very much. I can hear you, Kalanji. You're muted.
See, I'm running my mouth. I was saying some profound stuff. Y'all missed it. So, till next time. Thank you, Suzie, indeed, for laying it out. I know from being on calls with Suzie that Suzie is very passionate about Leonard Peltier, and it is easy. And I say this from experience, it is easy to be at a loss for words, because the thing is, in reality, for those of us who are in this particular fight, it's almost like a no-brainer. It's like us telling you that, there's air, you should breathe. We shouldn't have to do this. We shouldn't have to say that Leonard Peltier has to be freed, or that he should be freed. It's a no-brainer. We know, as you mentioned, Ward laid out in full metal jacket. This is what the U.S. government does. This is where we are. And this is an assault on not just Leonard Peltier, but it is an assault on humanity. It is an assault on nature. It is an assault on the planet itself. And it behooves you to get involved. Coming to the platform now, we have Paul Baer, Paul Berg. Forgive me. I'm giving everybody Suzie's last name now. Paul Berg, who was a teacher. I believe he was a 5th and 6th grade teacher, and I can be corrected, somewhere around there. I know Paul's like, no, that's not the grade, but it's okay. He'll explain to you, but he's coming out of, he was there on Pine Ridge, and he's someone who's been fighting for Leonard for decades as well. And we want to hear Paul's story and, give us some information that we haven't heard. And, without further ado, Paul Berg.
Okay.
Welcome.
Thank you very much. I came to the Pine Ridge Reservation with my wife, Virginia, in 1971 as a 7th and 8th grade teacher.
It's close.
For the Bureau of Indian Affairs. I was a Vietnam veteran, Naval Combat Intelligence, did two deployments between 1966 and 1969. So I was a trained observer in that sense. The reservation that we came to was in a state of chaos. That first year I was in front of my students, was beaten in a very bizarre incident, beaten by a tribal police officer. My jaw was broken. And we were going to leave the next day, but immediately the native community, and a group of Vietnam veterans came to me and said, no, you stay, don't leave. The community sided with me, in other words. I'd have to say it was one of the better things that happened to me on the reservation, because I kind of got my street smarts right there, and I was acceptable to the community. I'd like to give a little background about what happened on the Pine Ridge Reservation. There were several key incidents. One, I think, was the publication of Bury My Heart, a Wounded Knee in 1971 by D. Brown. That created a sensation. I think it gave a lot of impetus to the indigenous civil rights movement of the 70s. The other thing that happened on the Pine Ridge Reservation was the killing of Raymond Yellow Thunder in Gordon, Nebraska. The tribe did nothing to seek justice for Raymond Yellow Thunder and his family. The family went to the American Indian movement, who came on the reservation, organized a demonstration in Gordon, and finally the Attorney General of the state of Nebraska did file charges. So AIM was seen as standing up for the rights of the traditional indigenous people, not the tribal organization, which had become very corrupt and self-serving. Also, there was the Trail of Broken Treaties in 1972 that took over the BIA building in Washington, D.C. In 1973, the American Indian movement took over the village of Wounded Knee. And on the third day of the siege, myself and Joe Snyder, a tribal accountant, came upon two FBI agents brutalizing a Native American family, an Indian family. Grandpa, grandma, 6-year-old boy, 10-year-old girl. We intervened immediately. It was a very tight situation. However, we got the situation under control, immediately reported to the FBI in Pine Ridge what had happened. The next day, the number 2 person in charge of the siege came out and said, we've sent these 2 agents off the reservation. We want you assigned to the FBI tactical teams. I said, no way. I'm a 7th and 8th grade teacher. I don't want to be confronting your out of control agents. His voice started to shake and he said, they don't know what they're doing. People are going to be killed. I need you. And what we did is we checked with Russell Means through a communications channel we had in into Pine Ridge. It's into Wounded Knee. Russell said, never point your gun at anybody, never fire your gun. Keep those animals from killing anybody, and we have no problem with you being on the federal side. So myself and Joe, I was assigned from being a teacher to being a spotter, quote unquote, with the FBI during the siege, with the permission of the American Indian Movement. They knew I was there. They knew what we were doing. We did on 2 occasions stop a live gunfire situation and prevented further violence and tried to mitigate the damage these people were doing. As to working with the FBI agents, it was quite an eyeful. The agents were well educated. They were from urban areas. They were totally bewildered by coming out to the reservation. They tended to hang around the cars because the cars were cultural symbols they were familiar with. They didn't know about field operations, and they were mentally and physically unprepared for field operations. They were ignorant of the history of the Lakota, unaware of the pressing issues, and extremely arrogant. They were lawyers and certified public accountants, certified CPAs. I knew none of the young agents who'd gone to Vietnam. They all got deferments. So they were very, very deficient in actual world-wise knowledge. And by serving with them, I once was in a situation where the FBI agents on the next position over started screaming. They were panicking under fire, and which we found very amusing because the folks from Wounded Knee were just trying to scare them. They weren't in any real danger. But we had to stop everything. We had to bring in an armored personnel carrier and bring them out. So I had never in my life I'd seen bravery during the Vietnam War. I never saw people panic like that. So I was not impressed with the FBI. At the same time, the tactical control of the FBI was abysmal. The leadership did not have tactical control over their young men, their kids. They were acting behavior. Their behavior when off duty was abysmal. They were bullying people, pushing people around, acting very arrogant. At one point with my wife, there was a situation, and this is my wife here, this is 50 years ago, had to protect her from the attentions, sexual aggression of a FBI agent. And that was that much to the embarrassment of the other agents, I might add too. We got a lot of apologies over that. After the siege, all hell broke loose on the reservation. There was indeed a reign of terror. There were murders, hundreds of beatings. I came across people who were beaten on the side of the road more than one time. The Goon Squad operated with impunity. The Goon Squad was an extension of the FBI, an extension of their operation. How do I do this? They came to my house, wanted me to join, told me about the support the FBI was giving them. and I would be fully protected if I joined the Goon Squad. By Paul, you served with the FBI. You're a Vietnam veteran. Doesn't matter if you're not Indian. You can be part of us. I got as much information as I can, and then kicked them out of my house. It was a sad situation. The other thing they did is the FBI never really slept on the reservation. They would stay at motels at Hot Springs or the Gordon, Nebraska, or the border towns. They didn't have an information source, so what they did is they hired informants. And with a short period of time, this became the growth industry on the reservation, to become a government informant. These are very, very poor people, and they knew how to give the white man what he wanted if he paid money. So people were doing it. Well, when you were an informant, you had to make things happen. So a building would burn over here, something else would happen over there. They weren't trying to hurt people. They were just trying to make money and give the FBI what they wanted. The FBI did not catch on to this. I had quit the Bureau of Indian Affairs after the siege. My wife and I became Jesuit lay volunteers teaching at a mission school. And the FBI came to the mission school and said, you have to evacuate, your place is going to be burned down. Well, how do you know? Well, we have an informant. Well, it turns out through the Jesuits and through the Sisters of Notre Dame and our network of information, we found out who the informant was. He was one of their paid informants, and he was just putting together a story to prove his credibility. So, but as the violence continued on the reservation, the situation became progressively worse and out of hand. At one point, when President Ford heard about the children, several children had been shot and hurt, he put together a team of 12 not FBI, but Indian police from around the country. They were charged with coming on the reservation and protecting the children. I always had a place in my heart for President Ford for doing that. Most presidents wouldn't do that. But these guys who came, these 12 Indian policemen, were dedicated to protecting the children. And they, in my opinion, helped the situation. The FBI had been warned, you are going to get your people killed by operating like this. And by operating like this, I mean the agents were out of control. There was not tactical control on the part of the FBI leadership. They would go up behind cars, bump them to scare people, and then drive around. There was bullying. There was breaking into people's houses. People who came from Gordon, Nebraska with groceries would have their cars searched and the groceries dumped on the ground. That happened to Pat Pumpkinseed and his family one evening. The FBI, in my mind, the shooting that took place at the compound was a result of the lack of tactical leadership of the FBI. The agents, by the way, the two agents who did drive into the compound were violating procedures. They had been told that not to do that, especially one car driving in after the other. The reason being that was duplicating the drive-by shootings, which were happening all over the reservation. The agents did not were not even following the tactical direction they had been given. How do I know? I talked with agents about it afterwards. And they told me that this was, at least that level of tactical control had been conveyed to the agents, but were not being followed by the young agents. My particular thing that has motivated me over the years is one of my students, Sandra Wounded Foot.
She was shot. She was shot by one of the FBI agents.
Not FBI. It was a federal
agent. Yeah.
She was 15 years old, raped, tortured.
Her hands cut off.
The guy got 7 years. It helps if you have a federal badge and you're going to do something like that. Now, just that the injustice of the two situations is one thing that has motivated us over the years. Oh, what we did write a book about our experience there, and about tells about Leonard's case and the situation. So the experience for many of us who went through this, it remains a very traumatizing thing to this day. It still affects us, all of us who went through this. The injustice of that time period, the injustice of what is happening to Leonard today. And I really appreciate, Ward, what you said, and Suzie, what you have said. It fits in exactly with our experience. And again, I hope we can, through our joint efforts, bring about some justice to the situation. It's not a legal situation anymore. The FBI will do whatever it takes to keep him in prison. I believe it's going to take getting the word out, popular action, the media, the community. Maybe it takes social action, because the legal maneuvers, we've come to a dead end on this, I believe. So thank you very much for the opportunity to share our experience and contribute to getting Leonard out of prison.
Right on. We definitely thank you for your story, Paul. Very, I mean, it's on so many levels disturbing. It is heart wrenching. I mean, you're talking about a 15-year-old student raped and murdered. I mean, of course, we want to definitely learn more about Sandra Wounded Foot. That's yeah. The stuff that Ward and Suzie has talked about as well is definitely necessary, and I'm glad that that folks have the opportunity to learn from what it is from you all's experience, and hopefully during the Q&A, folks can get a little bit more. I want to bring up Leonard's personal assistant, one of our partners in against this criminal establishment. Someone that holds no punches and is a dear friend and comrade to Leonard. We're talking about Dawn Lawson. She's going to give a report on what's going on with Leonard's medical condition right now, because we know that Leonard has been going through what we call death by incarceration. We know that the state, one of the things that they do with folks like Leonard, folks like Mumia, folks like Imam Jamil Alameen, formerly H. Rap Brown, is if they can't outright give them the death penalty, they give them a different form of death penalty. They make sure that the foods that are being served is filled with sodium and poison. They make sure that the air they breathe in is limited. They make sure that the boxes that they are positioned in, they make sure that it's as unhealthy and uncomfortable as possible. Leonard, going on 80 years old on September 12th of this year, is a byproduct of what we call an attempted medical assassination. And Dawn Lawson is going to give us some updates on his medical conditions. And again, we want to remind folks that ticker that's rolling across the screen right there is not there to look cute. If you have it in your heart, in your spirit, make sure that you, contribute to Leonard's fund. We want to see him released, as we want to see all political prisoners released. But without further ado, I want to introduce you all to Dawn Lawson. Dawn, welcome, and you're muted.
Thank you, Kalonji.
Right
When
on.
I first met you, I remember you said, you're an OG when you have a personal assistant. I am deeply honored to be on this panel with all of you. I agree with Suzie Ward. You never talk long enough. I think you should consider audiobooks, seriously. I don't know how much knowledge can fit in one head. Leonard is undergoing severe medical neglect. It's BOP. A retired Leavenworth guard came out years ago, Bruce Smith, and said the FBI calls the shots at the BOP in a clear abuse of power. And the guards treat Leonard as if they will receive some special acclaim if he dies on their shift. And they do. Leonard has been in indefinite lockdown for 4 years now. And that is not covered by the United States press. You Google lockdown and you'll see there was a lockdown 2 years ago, but it ended. He is in an 8x10 cell 24 hours a day, allowed out for a shower 3 times a week, sometimes a couple hours a day. But his health has suffered. He has several comorbidities. What they will do is treat one symptom of one thing so they can say they've done something and call it done. He has sleep apnea, which plays into all the other comorbidities. I mean, every time you quit breathing at night, it puts enormous stress on your heart, along with, he's got a lot of things going on with his body. And they gave him a CPAP, but there is no electrical outlet to plug it into. So they can say, we gave him a CPAP. Theoretically, if he wanted to breathe, he could, but there's no electricity. I know the backstory of how Paul managed to stop a few of those shootouts. He is far too humble. I mean, he did so much for the people on that reservation. I'm sorry, I won't go into that, but at one point, he just started jumping up and yelling and screaming and acting like a lunatic. And it worked, because there's the FBI, they didn't know what to do. And Leonard is a prisoner of war. The FBI was really angry at Wounded Knee because there's a general that countermanded their orders from shoot to kill to shoot to wound. And they got the U.S. government to assign them paramilitary powers for a major confrontation in Indian country. So they could shoot to kill. And that major confrontation was over uranium. As Ward said, the day that the corrupt tribal chairman went and sold off uranium mining rights is the day those 2 agents drove in there. And everything that they have done and everything they are doing now to keep Leonard incarcerated is flat out illegal. I mean, it is nothing but tyranny and oppression. They are not supposed to be allowed to break their own laws. And we are allowing it to happen. Leonard has said repeatedly it will take a mass public outcry to get him out. And we have somehow got to make that happen. The Judiciary Committee, one of the things on the Act Now page is information for everyone on the Judiciary Committee. They're a body of 21 senators that was formed to oversee the Justice Department, the Bureau of Prisons, and the FBI, and make sure they adhere to their own laws. We don't see any of that happening. Somebody actually got a hold of one of them, and they said, that's not my department. They do not know what their jobs are, apparently. We do not live under a government that's in any way responsive, but somehow or another, we have got to figure out how to hold them accountable. This will cost Leonard his life if we cannot get him out of there and get him medical care. Leonard's lead counsel has put together a dynamic team of doctors, social workers. Dr. Morrissey goes in and visits Leonard, but he hasn't been granted permission to actually examine him yet. And it's not like the BOP is going to say, oh, come on in and take care of him. They have indeed sentenced Leonard to death by incarceration. And they are so invested in demonizing him. and labeling him a cold-blooded killer still, as a deflection. Colleen Rowley, a senior agent that was actually in on the prosecution, came forward years ago and said the only reason he's being held is out of an FBI family vendetta and sense of vindictiveness. They indoctrinate new agents with their version of the events. And people coming into the FBI learn about as Suzie said, is evil and effective. It works. It works. And the FBI runs our country. Historically, all our presidents have been terrified to risk the displeasure of the FBI. Clinton was going to grant clemency. He found himself surrounded by 500 FBI agents, with Bill Janklow inside the White House. Later, Janklow bragged about how Bruce, that's enough. I'm sorry, I've got a dog that talks. Later, Janklow bragged about how he talked Clinton out of it, but these are the people on the other side of the bars. The man who killed Sandra Woundedfoot, it was horrific what happened to that girl. He got out, and within a year, he had raped a 12-year-old. Bill Janklow, he raped a 15-year-old. The FBI covered that up because they found him very useful. And he used to drive around Rosebud and shoot people's dogs. He became governor and abolished the EPA because they want uranium. That's what this whole thing is about. The American Indian movement started looking into uranium mining and what they wanted to do on Pine Ridge. Immediately, they were declared the most dangerous group in the United States. Immediately. Bill Means said Janklow went from raping girls to raping Mother Earth. And he ended up taking out a motorcyclist blowing through a stop sign at 85 miles an hour. He'd been pulled over like 30 times for reckless driving, but they let him go because he's on the other side of the bars. He's a law enforcement officer. I've got a 9-year-old binary grandchild that they raised their fist and said, the FBI is not allowed to break their own laws. I said, say it loud and say it often. We need an army of 9-year-olds marching down the street. We really do. The reason Leonard is still being demonized is the FBI does not want anyone looking at their role in the reign of terror and all those people that died. There are the question nobody wants to ask is, why is it 2 white lives that matter? Why are those the only ones that matter? I'm white. People accuse me of it all the time. It's like, yeah, it's true. I'm so ashamed. I did not grow up on the wrong end of oppression, but I'm sick of watching it. I'm sick of watching it. And it is time for all of us to speak up. People are angry. People are finally getting angry at the government, at the corruption. It is a disease. And somebody yesterday was saying, well, there's no cure. And you know what? We're the cure. We're the cure. We are the only ones that can do something about it. There are more of them, us, than there are of them. And it's time for us to make our voices matter. Contact these people in the Judiciary Committee and say, yes, this is your department. And they are depriving this man of necessary medical care. They are keeping him locked in a filthy cell. They give them no cleaning supplies. They blast frigid air at them. And I don't know if that's an attempt at torture or to keep them complacent. They will not give him his medication. They have denied him his insulin. Now he's been hospitalized 3 times, and he's got a diabetic foot ulcer. That none of that would have happened if they would have been addressing the diabetes. You know, we've got a man who's almost 80 years old on a walker being held as a high-risk offender for aiding and abetting 2 men who were found not guilty. The church committee asked several senior FBI agents if they ever considered whether their actions were legal or not, and they all said no. One of them says, we're pragmatic. You know, they do not care. They do not have the grace to be embarrassed when they break the law. And that is oppression, that is tyranny, and we need to make it stop, and we need to get Leonard out of there. The cold-blooded killer thing, it's such an irony because there's nothing cold-blooded about that man. On a walker, he will stand in front of someone he doesn't even like to keep them from getting bullied. You know, he will take half of a 10-minute precious phone call, organizing everybody in line, making them settle down so they don't fight. He doesn't like violence. You know, he's a protector. The guards that know him know that. At his parole hearing, you know, that was a straight setup. Paul was dying to testify, and Paul was there. He knew what happened. Leonard's prosecutorial supervisor, who definitely knew what was happening and who was admitted they could not prove Leonard did anything except be there, and who was admitted there was prosecutorial misconduct, he wanted to testify. They wouldn't allow any of that. They don't want to talk about the truth. They don't want to hear it. They don't want to talk about it. They don't want to acknowledge it. And there are a lot of homicides back then that have not been answered for, that were engineered by the FBI using the goon squad as vigilantes. That is the only reason that they keep aiming everything at Leonard. And they need to quit. They need to just stop that. But we need to get Leonard, we need to demand he is moved to a medical facility immediately. If he was out here, he would be rushed to the emergency room. He is not in good shape. He has, well, you know, he's, of course, the diabetes has caused all kinds of complications. He's got an aortic aneurysm. They told him when it reached 5 centimeters, it would need addressed surgically or he would die. It got close to 5 centimeters. You know what their answer was? They quit measuring it. If we ignore it, then we don't have to do anything. He hasn't seen a dentist in over 10 years. The few remaining teeth he has are infected. He is experiencing intermittent blindness. He cannot even see any longer. The phone calls have been cut from 15 minutes to 10. You know, when you're on Leonard's list, you always have your phone with you. But the phone calls aren't happening any longer. And when they do, they're cut off after a couple of minutes. It's weird. It's weird. That I believe that the parole examiner recommending that he be evaluated for medical transfer, they do not want him transferred. They do not want him receiving health care. You know, they take their orders from the FBI, and the FBI wants him dead, and we cannot allow that to happen. We cannot allow that to happen. And our comrades in overseas countries are welcome to contact our Judiciary Committee and tell them how our human rights record looks to them. You know, for a long time, our government, this government claimed to be the greatest country on the, you know, whatever. You know, it's been whitewashed from the beginning. But this will be an entire history book someday on corruption, on the lengths that they will go to silence people, if you are a voice for the Black community, if you are a voice for the queer community, if you are a voice for Indigenous people, they want to wipe you out. They just straight up want to wipe you out. And they have acknowledged that. Ward is actually the person who caught why Leonard's 8th Circuit Court of Appeals was turned down. Everybody focuses on the language Haney uses, whether the jury was allowed to hear about FBI misconduct, which is stupid. FBI misconduct is smoking behind the boys' room. We're talking about killing people here. If the jury was allowed to hear evidence of that, what they did is they went judge shopping and found a judge willing to exclude it. If they would have possibly or probably changed the verdict. And that wasn't the reason. Ward caught it. At the very tail end, they said there is much to be regretted about the behavior of the FBI, but we do not wish to further impugn their integrity. This is all to uphold the illusion of the integrity of the FBI. That illusion is wearing really, really thin. Leonard needs his mass public outcry. Legal's doing their thing. We need to do our part and hold these people accountable. Say, why will you not? Why are you holding an 80-year-old man on a walker as a high-risk offender and not allowing him? The lockdowns, he cannot move. And he has lost so much arm strength, he can't pick up a paintbrush any longer. And he's on a walker. So he keeps falling. And if he falls on that aneurysm, he'll be gone immediately. So they don't want him transferred. I think this medical transfer is the fact that the parole examiner, and that's, it's like they can only suggest because the BOP is beholden to no one. They told me their policy supersedes the Constitution. And technically that's not true, but in practicality, right now it does. And as I said, we are the only ones that can change that. Leonard needs his mass public outcry. We need money. We also need, we understand it if people don't have money. It's too bad that airlines and motels and all that don't work on the barter system, but they will not take broccoli to, get everybody to Coleman. If you don't have money, tell somebody. People do not know who Leonard Peltier is. Watch Suzie's video. I've watched it several times in slow motion. I really wish Ward would do an audiobook. I've got 3 of his books back here that I keep referring to, but they're like really thick. There's a lot of stuff in them, but I could listen to you talk forever.
Okay.
And I should probably shut up. I have a problem with not ending where I should. But Leonard mass public outcry, and we need to get him to a medical facility yesterday. Period. We need to demand that. Thank you, Monty. Thank you, everyone.
No doubt. Thank you, Dawn, for your testimony. And don't worry, here at Black Power Media, if you don't know how to quit, we got a magic button that'll show you. But anyway, be like blink and you're gone. But no, so definitely appreciate you. You all giving testimony. I think that we want to open up the floor. We have about 30 minutes. We want to open up the floor for any questions from the audience. We know that you've gotten a lot of information. While you all are putting questions in the chat, I'll get it started to show you that I'm not scared to ask any questions. So what I would like to do is, because we heard a lot here today, and as I stated earlier, sometimes we are we're accustomed to movement language, and sometimes we think that everyone else around us speaks the same language, and to an extent, it's almost a degree of arrogance because we get so accustomed to it that we speak to each other about things like counterinsurgency, COINTELPRO, and it's second nature. So we don't want to lose anyone. We want to make sure that the work we do, the most important part is political education, because once you have that political education, then we're clear about who our enemy is, what the fight is about, who our comrades are, and we don't just get caught up in, as we say, black faces in high places. We don't get caught up in native faces in high places, because in the words of Malcolm, you don't call a man brother until he operates like one. So no, we're not saying that every native that ever walked is righteous, nor is every African that ever walked is righteous. Because sometimes, as Paul pointed out, those greenbacks sometimes they overshadow truth. But today we want to make sure that we bring you that pure, unadulterated truth. I want to definitely shout out Leonard's attorneys, uh, Jennifer Jones, who was on the screen earlier, had to hop off for another meeting, and also Maura Meltzer Cohen for the serious work they've been putting together in constructing a legal team, and also our sister Paulette and others who have been steadfast in making sure that we keep Leonard's name at the top of the charts. I want to start off with a question, because one of the things that have been referred to during this convo has been the reign of terror. And I know that Ward and Paul, I believe Elder Lenny as well, spoke about this reign of terror. So for folks who aren't familiar with what this reign of terror was, I guess I'll start with you, Paul, since you know uh, you spoke about a number of different things that impacted Pine Ridge and Wounded Knee, etc. So if you don't mind telling us, what is the reign of terror, and why is it important that we acknowledge it throughout these stages and pages?
Well, the Reign of Terror was usually referred to as the 18 months following after the end of the Siege of Wounded Knee. It was a time when there was a tremendous amount of beatings and killings on the reservation. The violence was directed mainly against the traditional Lakota people and people who were affiliated with some relationship with the American Indian movement. That in itself was quite a revolution about what the source of this was and what the motivation was. It wasn't a criminal element terrorizing the reservation in that sense. It was an extension of government policy. The church committee hearings several years later found that it was very typical of the CIA and government operations overseas to use frontal groups to perform their dirty work. Well, the FBI was adopting that tactic on the Pine Ridge Reservation by using the Goon Squad, and it went out of control for the FBI, but they didn't control it. They didn't attempt to control it. They just turned their faces away. There were, I would think, about 65 killings, but I believe there were more because there are people that just disappeared. Beatings that required medical attention, I would say in that time period, about 600. Now, this is in a population on the reservation at the time, it was around 20,000, 15 to 20,000. So you can imagine, it was like war. It was like warfare, if you will. Even at the mission school, we had put up lights connected to batteries. So if you went over the light, you went over the wire, the light went out. I would serve a 4 to 6 hour watch with an M1 carbine at night. And this was a Catholic mission school. We were and this was true around the reservation, people were gathered up and were afraid of what was happening. Another factor here was that the FBI agents, many of them who were on the reservation, were extremely marginal people. The FBI offices around the country were not sending their top agents. They were not sending the agents who were actively involved with cases. They were sending people that they were going to fire or marginal agents that were in the local office. And it really showed on the Pine Ridge Reservation. You had these bizarre, marginal, post-teenagers running around the reservation like a gang, causing problems, being sexually frustrated because they were away from their girlfriends and their wives, and pushing people around. So that was, for at least from my perspective, the reign of terror. We had 2 children shot. Sandra was killed. Delphine Red Shirt was shot, but she survived. Went to Stanford, got a PhD, by the way. So we're very proud of that young lady. I could go on about it forever, but I better be quiet and let somebody else respond.
No doubt. We definitely appreciate that, Paul. Appreciate what you bring to the table. I want to ask Ward. I know that along with this convo, and feel free to add on to what Paul just talked about, but the Goon Squad has been mentioned several times in this convo as well, and folks know about the FBI's role in this reign of terror. And of course, for us, the reign of terror with the FBI has been going on since its inception, going back to the Palmer raids, with J. Edgar Hoover in the early 1900s. I want to ask you again, the Goon Squad, what was their role? Because I think that some people are under the assumption that it was just the FBI versus the natives. And I think that in order to pull that thing off, sometimes we need, in the African community, we call them house Negroes. So, so in the Native community, I guess we can call them house Indians. So, I want to, if you could touch on, who the Goon Squad was and their role.
Well, actually, they're referred to or were as hang around the fort Indians. And you'd had that all along. You had people who were in active resistance who avoided the agencies. And that was what the Little Bighorn stuff was about, was a campaign to drive all the Lakotas and Cheyennes and so forth into their agencies. Didn't work out too well for Custer. He got an etiquette lesson, but okay. Goon Squad, primarily, you could say they're hang around the forts. Okay. Insofar as they're employed by the tribal government. The tribal government was the entity for a sufficient number of dead people voted in 1936, I believe is when Pine Ridge was reorganized, to change the governing structure from that traditional of the councils of elders and so on to this pallid imitation of the structure of the federal government, constitutional basis and all, blah, blah, blah. The Goon Squad was formed by a bootlegger on the reservation and I believe he was a plumbing contractor or something to that effect, who had held a position with the tribal government, used it for corrupt purposes, and was actually under federal charges for misappropriation of funds, left Pine Ridge, was operating in the Phoenix area of Arizona. The feds brought him back, Dick Wilson we're talking about, to run for tribal presidency on Pine Ridge. About the time they got some, it was National Uranium Research, something with an E, NUR, that was doing satellite photography looking for uranium deposits, and they detected one in the northwest quadrant of the reservation. So they brought Wilson back on a quid pro quo of they would utilize conduits, I suppose. Construction firms in Rapid City, for example, would be guaranteed that all the federal housing money dedicated to Pine Ridge would be theirs. They would be able to monopolize the contracts for construction of junk housing and make lots of money. And they needed to underwrite Wilson's campaign, and so on. There was more than that, but that's a good example. He was elected, and you needed immediately to change the dynamic on the reservation, because Pine Ridge was attempting, the general population of Pine Ridge was attempting to recover land that had been unlawfully taken in 1877 and thereafter, with regard to the Black Hills and so forth. The idea that the tribal government would turn over approximately an eighth of the remaining reservation to the feds because of this secret, at the time, deposit of uranium, which when they went and did field examinations, testing, trying to locate and assess the richness of the ore and all that, they found it was intermixed with molybdenum and also zeolite, which is used to filter water from reactors that has been contaminated. Zeolite's one of the few substances that you can filter out radioactive particles. So for the mineral potential was sufficient, but Wilson needed to change the sentiment so there wasn't an uprising in the reservation when he attempted, or in fact signed, the transfer agreement on the property from the tribe, as they called it, to the federal government. Becomes part of the Badlands National Monument. The area we're talking about is the Red Shirt Table, as it's called. It's adjacent to the Badlands, immediately below the northern boundary of the reservation, running over to the western side. And it's known as the Sheep Mountain Gunnery Range, reason being that in 1942, I believe it was, the feds had basically used the tribal government to effect a patriotic transfer of that area for use for training in aerial gunnery. That is, how to hit targets when you're moving at a high velocity, especially if you're firing at another object which is moving at a high velocity with a 50 caliber machine gun, which has a lethal range of about 3 miles. It's not like you can just start practicing that where there's a lot of population around. There was some population on Sheep Mountain, which was transferred, evicted basically, and not particularly well supported. They were just removed from their land, from their holdings, and dumped outside the gunnery range. And understanding was that at the end of hostilities, the land would be transferred back into tribal jurisdiction. Well, I don't know about you, but I heard that the Second World War ended 3 years later after the transfer was made in 1945. We're in 1970, so, they're really wanting to recover that land in addition to the 1868 stuff. So that's the direction of the agitation. The goons were formed utilizing the allocation of federal housing fund, federal highway funds, road improvements. And you know, it was a standing joke that if you're driving down the road and suddenly the bottom went out from under your car, you just crossed the line into a reservation. Pine Ridge roads are absolutely terrible, such as there were roads, and they're not great now. So he had about $250,000 to fill potholes and repair bridges and stuff that was utilized to form this, goon squad. No, they were called goons. They called themselves goons, and they said it stood for Guardians of the Oglala Nation. And this was an armed force. Tribal Rangers is what they tried to pass them off by in their reporting, who reported only to Wilson. And they began this campaign of intimidation, beatings, burned. There was a reservation opposition paper, liberation paper, really, that was run by Aaron DeSouza and his wife. It was burned one night by goons, and they were badly burned. Byron DeSouza, their son, becomes a founding member, leader of the Oglala Sioux Civil Rights Organization, OSCRO, as it was called, to try to assert the rights of the grassroots people vis-a-vis this increasingly dictatorial regime of Dick Wilson. And I told you, the Reorganization Act was a sort of pallid imitation of the constitutional form of the federal government. They had a constitution. It was written in Washington, D.C., and then it was put up to a vote. That was the procedure. And then dead people began to come out of their graves to vote aye in sufficient numbers to vote for reorganization. So you had this governing structure that was in place the whole time, which was beholden entirely to federal government operating under rules devised by the federal government. OSCRO, these guys were not dummies. They utilized that Constitution to collect enough signatures to begin impeachment proceedings against Dick Wilson. And feds could hardly stop that since it was their own rule. Don, sometimes they're caught up in public way so that they have to proceed. So they did. Yeah, they proceeded. Wilson basically ran his own impeachment proceeding. And before he ever got to the impeachment hearing itself, he ran a John Birch Society produced film about communism in the U.S. and the threat to freedom and all of that. But the night before the impeachment proceeding was to occur, he'd used the tribal police to effect the arrest on one pretext or another of virtually everyone on the tribal council who was considered not to be a Wilson voter, who were likely to vote for his impeachment. They were all in jail at the time the meeting occurred. He did not formally chair the meeting, but his number two guy, ran it, and they voted to retain him in office. Yeah. And they figured there's going to be a heavy response to that. So as he steps to the podium after he's been continued as tribal president and announces that there is a prohibition that he's imposed on meetings of more than 3 people anywhere in the reservation for an indefinite period of time. Okay, now that might have caused an explosion right then and there, but the feds, they wanted to maintain order. So they had already imported a SOG team, Special Operations Group, 60 strong, wearing baby blue jumpsuits, who'd set up machine gun emplacements on the tribal office buildings and so forth. They were already in place. So now you got the goons and this special unit of marshals, militarized unit, and this is what precipitates the siege of Wounded Knee, because the traditionals, the opposition, convened an indoor meeting at the Calico Hall outside the town of Oglala, just north of Pine Ridge town, which is the seat of tribal government. And they requested representatives of the American Indian movement to come and speak with them about what could be done under these circumstances. Russ Means comes down because, and a crew, they come down to meet with the elders at the Calico Hall, you know, at the request. But Russ is from Pine Ridge. He's a landholder, and he'd been banished from the reservation despite the fact that he was an enrolled member of the Oglala Sioux tribe, as they call it, and a landholder on the reservation, in common with his brothers, Bill, who has been mentioned, and Ted, known as Gov, and Dale, or Dace as he was called, those four primarily. But Russ listened to what was being said was the problem, and he went down to see if he could meet with Wilson, and was ambushed in the parking lot, not with weapons, well, not with guns, but physically, and got whacked upside the head pretty good. They fought their way out of it, went back to Calico Hall, and sent out the call for AIM leadership to convene there. So Banks and Carter Camp and others who were in Rapid City area already for related reasons having to do with the murder of a guy, Wesley Badhart Bull, in a little town of Buffalo Gap, just west of the reservation. So you had demonstrations that were already occurring. Rapid City in that area was already kind of ground zero for AIM. So they came, and there was a discussion, and the old guys, the traditional chiefs of the time, Fool's Crow, Red Cloud, Oliver Red Cloud, and Bad Cop, all of them basically said, you know, need to get the word out. Nobody knows what's going on the reservation. We need to do something that will cause people's attention to be directed here. So it was decided to go to Wounded Knee Hamlet, very small community. The Catholic Church sitting on a hill was its main signifier, but there was the Gildersleeve trading post there and a museum, as they called it, personally owned property that these expropriators, price gouging, the sort that you would find in the inner cities on the reservation, was even more pronounced. They went, and the idea was to bring the press in the next day, hold this press conference, and there was not any consensus as to what happened next. I mean, generally speaking, they were going there to hold a press conference under circumstances that were symbolic. Bury My Heart at Wounded Knee had come out, as was mentioned earlier, and, you know, maybe go back to Rapid City. But when they woke up, and Ted Means was sent up to Rapid City to mobilize the press corps and bring them down. In the he was mobilizing press, but before they could get there at dawn, two things had happened. The marshals had already set up roadblocks on all four roads that you could access Wounded Knee from, and Wilson's goons set up roadblocks behind their roadblocks and they had people out on the land. So essentially, they're surrounded, and for the next 71 days, they're under siege. And we could go off into the negotiations and all of that, but you've got, at that point, the implementation of this garden plot. All right. The Nixon White House dispatched military officers specializing in counterinsurgency, Potter and I can't remember off the top of my head the second one's name for starters. They arranged with the government and National Guard in South Dakota to provide armored personnel carriers, and they had a preposition thing happening with Fort Carson, Colorado, for military ammunition, weapons, and so forth to be sent in. Arranged with Ellsworth Air Force Base outside of Rapid City to do reconnaissance overflights, and to also do overflights so low that at Baer, that they're shaking everybody up on the ground. You got large numbers of federal personnel sent in with all this equipment. FBI, primarily Marshals Service, U.S. Marshals, not all SOG personnel, but lots of personnel. And they're maintaining this siege perimeter. People are having to backpack supplies in. People are being intercepted and killed along the way, according to several sources, including Dwayne Brewer, who was in charge of Wilson's Goon Squad, to the west side of the reservation. To the east side, you got Charlie Manson, as he was called, this whole family of goons, but you got lots of goons. The goons turn out to be overlapped with the Bureau of Indian Affairs Police. About a third of the goons are actually cops who are moonlighting as goons. So you have a salary supplement that's going on here. So what you have is, this death squad, this civic organization, or whatever you want to call it, on the ground, and it's being augmented by white John Mix County Rangers and so forth, which are white vigilante organizations, Birchite organizations, some of which become posse comitatus people. You've got those. You've got the National Guard. You've got federal law enforcement in the form of marshals and the FBI. You've got Richard G. Held, who becomes associate director of the FBI by the time he retires, but he's already been the special agent in charge of Minneapolis, and then goes to headquarters for a headquarters position. He's stripped out of that and sent into Chicago to handle the cover-up of the Hampton Clark assassination, Black Panther leadership in Chicago. It's on his watch when the FBI claims not to even have a file open on Chicago Panthers. The Church Committee, which has been mentioned, which is investigating, the activities of federal intelligence agencies, starts, a document from that's been revealed in their proceedings to the plaintiffs, the Panthers that were suing. The testimony had been entered in that case. The FBI had no paper on the Chicago Black Panthers. The judge orders them to rethink that and bring in all the paper. They did that on hand courts 2 days later, I think. That's Richard G. Hill. He is sent out to do an inspection of the proceedings during the siege and make a recommendation. Well, that's this paper that pops up in general distribution within the Bureau. during 1975, just ahead of the Oglala firefight. Okay, but Spin, he wrote it in 73. And among other things, what it said was the FBI and the FBI alone in military or paramilitary operations, insurrections on Indian reservations should take immediate charge. Nothing about the Marshal Service. Marshals are in the way. And, you know, that's to shoot to kill and all the rest of it. Right off the bat, that's how the response should be formed, not the way it was done on Pine Ridge. So they're learning as they go. But as was mentioned, the way they went, Held went home for a while. So you have Joe Trimbaugh still in charge of the FBI office, special agent in charge of Minneapolis office, and Western South Dakota falls within the jurisdiction there. He manages to up the ante in number of agents that are assigned, irrespective of the quality. Some were, no doubt, just absolute. Let's send this guy to South Dakota and be done with it for now. But there were some who were kind of eager beavers. David Price and his partner Woods and such as that. You got the heaviest concentration of FBI personnel to citizens in Western South Dakota of anything in the history of the FBI up to that point. Not as a result of the firefight in which agents are called, but prior to that. Once the agents are killed, then another 250 that are essentially operating in a military capacity hit the reservation. It's completely through the roof at that point. But during that period, when you got this super concentration of FBI personnel, that's the period, the reign of terror. William Muldrow from the Justice Department Human Rights Commission, based out of Denver, comes up and basically does fact finding, gathers information, testimony, documents, and so forth about what's going on. And he's the title of his report is Reign of Terror. He determines that the federal authorities are instigating, presiding over, coordinating, and so forth, endemic violence. That's the 600 beatings that require medical attention. That's actually 69 that Jim Vanderwall and I basically documented. FBI responded to that claim by confirming quite a lot of it later on. But when 69 members and supporters of the American Indian movement are killed, that's an attempt to completely crush the movement, clear the way for the transfer to occur without further ado, and get on with business as usual. The expectation was that the traditionals would cave, the name would retreat, and everything well before June of 1975, but it had not played out that way. And so the plan was to send these two agents in to a name secured property, instigate a firefight. They had a SWAT team pre-positioned in the immediate area, and others had a lot of agents there as well. Firing had barely begun when the first of those agents attempted to enter the property. And that was J. Gary Adams, who took fire from the houses that were the family compound, if you will, that was being secured by AIM. The AIM had established a camp down by a creek a little ways away, but you had some youngsters that were up at the house with rabbit rifles, really, and they fired on the FBI car that was coming in. The two agents were already under fire down. They'd driven down towards the AIM camp through a field. They were under fire. The agent Adams, as he was driving in, takes a bullet from a 22, I think it was, in the windshield, slams on his brakes, throws his car in reverse, and drives full speed into the ditch out by Highway 18, and then lays in the ditch, you know, securing his well-being while his two partners are getting shot to death in the valley. One of the last radio transmission was, come on guys, we can still get in here if you get out of here if you come in now. Well, you know, they're in the middle of nowhere, theoretically. So who it is that they're radioing to come in, you know, is one of those questions that was never properly posed at trial. Never at all, as far as I know. The goons, the SWAT team, BIA SWAT team that was in the immediate area had better sense than to go in. They knew, generally speaking, who was down there and what the situation was. So, you know, you got this force buildup that includes large numbers of FBI SWAT personnel coming in from Quantico, Virginia. They're in the air. William Janklow, who has been mentioned, who is, at this point, I believe he's still Attorney General of the state of South Dakota, gets the word in Pierre, goes to the airport where apparently a plane was primed and waiting for him to get that word, flies to Hot Springs, that's halfway across the state, where you got American Legion, at the American Legion Hall, you get assemblage of white vigilantes ready to go, and makes it to the Jumping Bull property before the firing even ends. Okay, so during the firefight, all of that's happened. So they knew something was going to happen, and the happening was supposed to divert attention from the transfer of the property on the one hand, but also provide the pretext. You know, you could crush this AIM security group and have a pretext for introduction of just this massive federal force to the reservation and roll it up finally once and for all. And there you have it. The goons were functioning in a domestic context of the United States as the U.S. defines it, and essentially the same way. If you read Penny Larno's book, Cry of the People, the CIA operations in Central America were running, okay, with the police functioning as death squads and killing off people who were considered to be effective leaders on the other side, and killing a sufficient number of grassroots activists to intimidate the population into acquiescence.
We have to definitely come back and do a part 2. I think that you know, there's so much that that, I mean, the way you just ended it as far as just this last breakdown is something literally for the books, and I think that it's important for us to really break this down. There needs to be a class, and I'm calling. I want to invite you, along with folks like Bob Boyle and Deruba and so many others, to really lay out this whole history of counterinsurgency, everything from COINTELPRO to New Kill to uh, uh, Chess Rob and so many other different components, because there's so many levels to this thing. And I think that sometimes, in so many agencies, because I think that sometimes folks, you know, they speak on the FBI, they speak on the CIA, but of course we know there's over 1,000 policing agencies inside the U.S. Alone, not to mention the close to 1,000 military bases around the globe. So definitely, I hate to end it, and I would like to come back as well at a later time and possibly invite Elder Lenny Foster and others, because one of the things that
Okay.
is important when we talk about Wounded Knee, one other historical moment that is often glossed over or damn near forgotten, at least in U.S. history books, is the December 29th, 1890 Wounded Knee Massacre, which I think is important when we're talking about
Oh yeah.
blood being spilt on this soil.
Oh
You know?
yeah.
Yeah. So
And I am going to have to check out for a moment. So
we all
thank
good.
you very much for putting this on, and I'll be back if you're still here.
Yeah. Oh, I'm about to leave with you. I got things to do.
Okay.
So.
Okay.
Right on. So yeah, so definitely appreciate you, Ward. Appreciate you to our panelists, Elder Lenny Foster, who we look forward to hearing more from in the future. I know that working with Leonard Peltier, we'll be seeing a lot more of each other. Paul Berg, we definitely appreciate the strong experience that you've laid out, you and your wife Vergie, I believe. Yeah, you know, we definitely appreciate what you all have brought to the table, and I want to say you're the first former FBI agent that we've ever had on this platform, and you get a pass today because we don't with the police, but you know what I'm saying, since you're on the right side of the barricades, we're gonna we definitely appreciate you coming on. Suzie, make sure that folks, we appreciate your work. Folks, make sure that you check out Warrior.
Can I'm sorry,
Not
Kalanji.
ready.
I just want to say a couple things. One, I would love to have a screening of Warrior with Paul Berg and Ward Churchill, like talking during it. That like would be brilliant. Might never end.
Good idea. No, it wouldn't.
Right. But like, oh God, the whole anyway. And I just want to say that two things. Please all donate to freeleonardpeltiernow.org. It is the only organization that is sanctioned by Leonard Peltier, and donate your money there. It is, the money is spent the best there. I can't emphasize that enough. And the other thing is we need to get him out. We need to get this man out. He's going to be 80 in September. I've been working on this since I'm 22 years old. I'm about to be 58. Like, let's get him out. Oh, okay. And that means donate and talk about him more. And yeah, thank you.
No doubt. We definitely appreciate that. Suzie and I co-sign what you said about bringing Ward and Paul. In fact, we need some in-person screenings to bring that back around the block. So definitely appreciate that. Dawn, appreciate your work. You know, over in the offices, making sure that you raise hell and virtually smack anyone that crossed the line when it comes to Leonard Peltier. We appreciate you, the audience, for checking us out today on this nice Sunday. I guess this would be your revolutionary church for today. We encourage you, as Suzie stated, to donate. There's a link scrolling across the bottom of this piece, freeleonardpeltiernow.org/act-now, or you can remember freeleonardpeltiernow.org. Go to the site, support what's going on. Make sure you share and subscribe to this platform. We on yesterday we've reached 50,000 subscribers on this particular platform, so make sure we share and build up this media outlet. This is an outlet where you're going to learn about political prisons, where you're going to learn about counterinsurgency, where you're going to learn about organizing. All of the hosts on this platform are organizers. One of the criteria for you to be on Black Power Media as a host is you must be an organizer, either involved in an organization or affiliated in some fashion form. Political education is key. We thank you all for joining us here today. Stay safe out there. Stay on the right side of the barricades. Until next time, the call is free 'em all.
Free 'em all. Thank you, Kalonji.
Yes, yes. Peace.